Welcome to She Is Your Neighbor, a show where we discuss the realities and complexities of gender-based violence. This podcast is brought to you by Women's Crisis Services of Waterloo Region, a charitable organization in Ontario, Canada. I'm Lily Proksch, your podcast producer, filling in for our host, Jenna Main, while she's away on maternity leave. Join me each week as we talk to people to learn how domestic violence impacts people from all walks of life. She is your neighbor, and we all have a role to play in ending domestic violence. This episode is called Bystander Intervention and the Rise of AI with Julie Lalonde. Julie is an author, a public educator, and a survivor of domestic violence and stalking. In this episode, we talk to Julie about the realities of the evolving technological landscape and the risk technology can pose to survivors of gender-based violence. We also talk about consent culture in relation to AI, the Canadian Anti-Stalking Association, and how to make bystander intervention more accessible. I was so grateful to talk to Julie in this episode of the podcast. I have been following Julie online for a really long time as a way to learn more about the advocacy work that she's been doing and also to learn more about stalking. She also has written her book, Resilience is Futile, The Life and Death and Life of Julie S. Lalonde. And I learned so much in that book about some of the feelings that go along with being a survivor of stalking and especially the complicated grief that can come along when your abuser dies. I think another thing that was really impactful that we talked about in this episode was technology. And technology can be a really great thing, but technology can also be a really scary thing, especially for survivors of violence when technology facilitated abuse or technology facilitated stalking is used against them. One example of this that I can think of is when we talked about AirTags and how AirTags seemed like such a cool invention from Apple, but very quickly they turned into basically a stalking device. And no one was really thinking about that when they were created. However, the harm that they have caused has been so vast. We also talked a lot about AI and how the way that technology is evolving is very dangerous. And it can be dangerous in a variety of different ways. And we need to think really deeply about what is and isn't safe. Another thing that I really love about Julie is her way that she approaches bystander intervention. I've always thought that bystander intervention was very scary, very nerve-wracking. It can really feel like you're impeding in somebody's very personal relationship. But Julie has made it very accessible, and she made it seem that it is not as scary as some people might think it is. So I'm excited for people to listen more and to learn some different ways that you can do bystander intervention that aren't as scary as fully intervening in someone's personal relationship. I'd like to thank the sponsor of this season of She Is Your Neighbor, One for the Wall Photography. For 17 years, Hillary of One for the Wall and Hillary Gold Commercial has captured powerful, authentic stories for families, brands, and creatives across southwestern Ontario. Her moving Down syndrome photo series has helped shift perceptions and celebrate real lives with honesty and heart. Hillary has also been the series photographer of She Is Your Neighbor since its inception in 2019 and has helped shift the way that communities view survivors of domestic and gender-based violence. Hillary seeks to find and reflect the big thinker and dream chaser that lives in every soul. To learn more and see Hillary's work, please visit Hillary Gold Commercial or One for the Wall Photography. Before we get started, I'd like to note that the following episode includes a discussion of domestic violence, which may be distressing or traumatic for some listeners. Please take care of yourself and don't hesitate to ask for help if you need it. Hi, Julie. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good. It's so good to see you. I'm very grateful that you're here to talk to us again.
Yeah, thanks so much for inviting me back.
Of course. For those who haven't listened to your first podcast and might not know who you are, do you mind sharing a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Julie Lalonde, and I am currently based in Ottawa, but I'm originally from small town Northern Ontario. I am a survivor of intimate partner violence and stalking, and I'm a longtime advocate for victims and survivors of gender based violence, but also pushing for better community care, teaching people bystander skills. And really, the bulk of my work is around prevention, based in the reality that we know that most of this stuff can be prevented if we work together.
That's so important. We've been focusing a lot on prevention in the last few years as well. It's so important. We also know you've written a book, Resilience is Futile. I love your book. I read it the first time that we interviewed you, and I felt like it was so intimate and so personal and so important to share what the realities of stalking look like. Do you mind sharing a little bit about your book and about your story, if that's okay?
Yeah, and thank you. That's very kind of you to say. So, I had an abusive boyfriend when I was a young woman. I left him when I was 20, and he went on to stalk me for a decade. And in that time, I built a career as an advocate for other women and girls. And I kind of lived this dual life of being seen publicly as someone who was calling out institutions and creating campaigns and kind of rallying people to address gender-based violence, and then privately was dealing with my own kind of nightmare. And even someone with my position and the platform that I had, it was not safe for me to talk about, because the unfortunate reality of stalking is that talking about it often makes it worse. And so it's a very isolating experience. And it only ended when he died, and quite suddenly. And so then I kind of came out, so to speak, about my story, and tried to kind of reconcile these two kind of parallel lives that I lived for quite some time. And now that he is dead, it's safer for me to talk about and kind of help and kind of raise awareness, because, as I said, we're not going to have a Me Too type moment around stalking, because by definition, talking about it makes it worse. And so, unless that stalker is dead or behind bars, it's really not safe to talk about. And so, it really is, I think, one of the most invisible and under discussed forms of gender based violence in Canada. And so, my book was really I was asked to write it, and I was very reticent to do so, because I don't think we actually need more survivor stories in the world. I think we need solutions. And writing that book was not in any way, shape, or form part of my healing journey whatsoever. But I decided to go ahead with it only if I could really bring that feminist analysis to it, to sort of talk about how this isn't about me and it's not about him. Really, it's about a system that sets women like me up to fail and men like him to never suffer any kind of accountability.
That's really interesting. I know something that we talk about a lot on the podcast is safety, and safety of the people that we're talking to is so important to us. And the reality of that is that we're more likely to be able to share someone's story if their partner or former partner is dead. So it's interesting to talk about and to think about. And it's interesting that you think we don't need more survivor stories. Obviously, like there's very good reason for that. And there's a lot of empowerment in sharing your story. It needs to also coincide with solutions at the same time.
Yeah, I feel like we're in a very exploitive time right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, like, literally right now, I respect the choice of survivors of Jeffrey Epstein who fought for the release of the Epstein files. But I think it's just resulted in really, really, really negative consequences, where it's turned into memes, where you have sexual abusers who are like really enjoying graphic details around it. And I think there's this sort of exploitive nature right now, where unless you're willing to tell your story, often in very graphic detail, it didn't really happen to you, it wasn't really true. And so I feel like there's a lot of pressure for survivors to come forward in order to be believed.
Mm-hmm.
And I often hear from survivors who say to me, like, how do I tell my story? And I'm like, I need you to take a beat and think about why you want to tell that story, because the worst people you know are going to hear about the worst things that ever happened to you. When
Mm-hmm.
people Google you, that's what's going to come up. And if what you're looking for is validation from the outside world, it's probably not going to come. If people saw the level of disgusting emails and comments that I received in telling my story, I think it would give people a beat in thinking about that. And so, to me, there's a particular survivor narrative that we like to hear, which is like, my
Yeah.
life was great, this awful thing happened, then I got sober, found Jesus, he went to jail, and now everything is fine. And there's sort of this like linear story that people want, and it's palpable. And so, like, the whole thing is just really, um, complicated for me. And so I know it's a bit of a hot take, but I'm just sort of like, we've raised the awareness. The awareness has been raised, but we have not moved towards solutions. And I just don't think it's that, oh, everything will fall into place and things will change if we just hear like one more story, that'll help things click. And it's like, we heard literally millions of stories since Me Too moment in 2017, and literally what has changed. And so I want to say, like, I honor and respect survivors for whom that's important. And I know Giselle Pellico, for example, has a book that's coming out, and her case galvanized the world, and I respect that choice. But in my view, I think it's actually causing material harm to the movement as a whole rather than actually moving us forward.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, especially over the last few years. We also talk about when we started this podcast that we don't want it to be like trauma porn. Like, we don't want to be making light of this or having people see this other than as a way of empowerment. And we have seen even like the rise of true crime and everything. It just feels so gross to me to be able to like make money off of people's awful traumatic stories.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And I don't think we can separate the rise of true crime from things like the Me Too moment in
Mm-hmm.
2017, right? And from the pandemic when people were feeling very isolated and very scared. And so they were turning towards something. And again, I've never been someone who understood the appeal of true crime. I know lots of feminists who will defend it to the nth degree and talk about how helpful it can be for survivors, but that's not my journey. And I think it is important to present kind of an alternative view around what do we think the outcome is going to be from us kind of flaying our stories out into the world, when the world can be so profoundly unkind. And I think we see that at an interpersonal level, and
Mm-hmm.
we see it within, like, survivors versus the legal system. But for some reason we think you just put that out in social media, you do a couple of media interviews, and you're only going to hear warmth and support come back to you. You don't. But also, I don't think people are equipped to understand that, like, you're now going to have to deal with 50,000 disclosures from complete strangers who think
Mm-hmm.
because they know intimate details about you that they can share intimate details about themselves. And many, many, many survivors I know who came forward were like, holy smokes, I was not prepared to then be the support worker for hundreds of people in my DMs. And so, like, I think if you want to tell your story, you need to work with somebody who can support you in doing that, because the
Yeah.
idea that that's some sort of panacea is just really false. And I can speak from that from personal experience for sure.
It's false, and it can be very dangerous. And if
Yeah.
someone is sharing their story, too close to when it happened, it can be very, very dangerous. And we know, violence is most likely to escalate as a survivor is leaving their relationship. And I know that post separation abuse is not something that's talked about a lot. And I know that it's very intertwined with stalking. And I recently read Pam Cross's book, And Sometimes They Kill You. And something that she mentioned, and something you actually mentioned in your last episode, is that sometimes it's safer for survivors to stay in their relationships. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the severity and the risk that's associated with post separation abuse and with stalking.
The reality is that intimate partner violence is about power and control. And so if I leave you, I've taken some of my control back, and I've told you, explicitly or implicitly, like, you can't control me anymore. I'm out. Like, I'm no longer in your sphere. And therefore, that can trigger this sort of, if I can't have you, nobody can. Direct quote that many of us have heard, myself included, from my abuser. And what's fascinating to me is that that's actually kind of fairly common knowledge in some cases. And even the reality that women's shelters, for example, don't have posted addresses. They have anonymous, they look like just nondescript houses in different neighborhoods to protect women from what? From stalking. And that's what's been so infuriating to me, is like, we talk about stalking, but we don't put the label on it. And so when I say something like stalking, did you know in Canada it's called criminal harassment? And people are like, oh, interesting, never heard of that before, don't know what it looks like, or assumes it's a sort of Hollywood stereotype of like, I'm stalking a celebrity. But then when you say, oh, why is it that women have to go into nondescript buildings when they leave their abusive partners? Oh, because they're being stalked. There's a name for that, right? It's a particular form of violence. And so
Yeah.
what happens is you transition from one type of violence, which is being controlled in the immediate sense of this person's controlling your life, your physical, where you can go, your money, your access to your community, your access to going to work. And you now shift to ostensibly being free from that level of control. But now that person has moved towards controlling you via surveillance, monitoring, policing you, surveilling the folks around you to get intel into where you are, trying to reach you. So it's a very, very dangerous time. And it really, to me, is just shifting from one form of violence to another. There's no real kind of break between the two. It's just a transition that we, I think, recognize in many cases, but fail to label. And that's not just an issue of like, it's annoying or semantics, you know? It's if we don't label it, then people don't make the connection of like, oh, stalking is dangerous. Stalking is scary. Stalking is something that I know someone who has been stalked. This isn't actually something that's far removed from my life, right?
Why do you think that it's not being labeled as stalking?
Stalking's only been a crime in Canada since 1993. And when I created the Canadian Anti-Stalking Association in 2024, it was the first ever organization in Canadian history to be dedicated to stalking. So the reason why it wasn't talked about or wasn't labeled properly is because, frankly, there was nobody to kind of hold that space in Canada. And we know that women's shelters are doing stalking safety planning all day, every day, but they don't have the capacity. They're literally in the process of trying to save women's lives, working with so few resources. They don't have capacity to also take on the education and awareness around stalking. So it was kind of this like hot potato that nobody really knew what to do with within the sector, the women's movement. And I can tell you, survivors also don't know who to reach out to because there were no services, because there's no organization and no real public awareness. And so I would tell people, well, you can actually call your local shelter. Yeah, but I'm not looking for housing. Well, they actually have a crisis line where they offer that kind of support. And people were like, oh, I thought you just called them if you needed housing. And so like there was no kind of obvious flashing sign of like, this happens to you, this is who you talk to. The vast majority of people are stalked by an ex-partner in Canada. Only 12% of people are stalked by a stranger. But who that acquaintance could also be a coworker. It could also be a former roommate, right? So again, it's not intuitive that I'm going to call a women's shelter for something that's happening from my ex-boss, right? Like, right. So that's like, it kind of just, I think, fell through the cracks just looking at the pragmatism of like, well, whose job is it in Canada to actually pick up the torch on this?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think it's interesting that because of the way that it's been framed, people don't think that it is a part of intimate partner violence or domestic violence. So that's a really interesting point. And I know that you brought up the Canadian Anti-Stalking Association, and I would love to hear more about it. I follow y'all on socials, but I would like to learn more about how you educate, advocate, and collaborate to prevent stalking from occurring. I think that's a mission. So I'd love to hear more about it.
Yeah. So Canada has, as I said, it's only been 30 plus years that stalking's actually been illegal in Canada as its own kind of standalone crime. Interesting and important to note that it became its own standalone crime as a result of gender-based violence. So it's not happenstance. Like it was the legal system seeing case after case after case. And they were just like, what can we label this? And so our goal is to really just be the folks who are holding the space around stalking, showing up at different tables around gender-based violence. It is astounding to me that I spent so many years working in this movement. I studied this work. I've only ever worked in this sector, and I never once heard anybody mention stalking in a panel, at a conference, on an infographic. Like it just was not happening. And yet whenever I would mention it just very sort of obliquely in my own work, immediately I would hear from people who were like, thank you so much for mentioning that. So that's really the space we're trying to hold, is just to add to the existing conversation around gender-based violence. Canada has one of the worst responses to stalking of any country in the Western world. Even the United States has better infrastructure. In places like the UK, they have national hotlines that folks can call to get support, get access to legal advocacy. So we don't have that capacity in Canada yet. So we are not offering or not able to offer that individual support and advocacy, but we do give those referrals to folks who are looking for it. And we advocate at the systemic level. And so our first big mission was to amend Canada's criminal harassment law, which we successfully did. And it's been proposed and it's now in the House and being voted on and debated on. So that was a huge victory. And we have some more sort of legal changes we want to make. and really just sort of build up the infrastructure. So I train law enforcement. I train folks who are frontline workers in shelters, sexual assault centers, victim services, social workers. I go into schools and I talk to young people and teachers around, you can't talk about dating violence if you don't also talk about stalking. When you talk about consent, that also needs to include respecting when someone says no, not just in a sexual context, but when someone dumps you and says, leave me alone, you don't get to blackmail them with their nudes now.
Yeah.
That's not how it works, right? And so really just trying to reach as many people as possible. Because I think people know what it is. Like it's not like I'm telling them a term they've never heard before, but they've never connected the dots. And I think that's really our mandate right now.
Yeah, that's incredible. I love all the education that you're doing. It's really going to make such a difference. And it's hard. I was just talking about this on another interview. It's hard to see the impact of what that can look like sometimes, but I hope you know the incredible difference that you're making with that too. Do you think that it would be do you have plans to try to change the way that stalking is defined? Because you said that it's defined as criminal harassment. Do you think it would make more of an impact if it was defined as stalking?
I don't think the terminology makes a big difference, to be honest. I used to think, oh, maybe we need to. And then I actually spoke with colleagues in the United States for whom it is legally referred to as stalking. And they said they have their own issues because the term stalking has become slang term for I was stalking them on Instagram, or I swiped this guy on Bumble. So then I started stalking him. So they're having their own struggle around people then don't understand that it's its own legal term. So that actually really kind of shifted my thinking around oh, maybe it's just educating people on what we mean when we say criminal harassment. So the language we're okay with as is, but the big issue that we're focused on is that currently the definition of criminal harassment in Canada, you have to prove it was repeated, unwanted, and made you fear for your safety. And the fear for your safety piece is the component that needs to change. And thankfully, we were heard from Parliament. And so that's what the current amendment is looking like.
Oh, that's incredible. That's a huge change. Amazing.
Yeah.
I'm also interested in your thoughts on technological abuse, because I know in your book and in our former podcast, you talked about how you were stalked in every way that people think of when they think of stalking. So you had your identity stolen. He had, taken over your social media, and he had talked to your family on social media. Technology has kind of really changed the way that stalkers can get access to their victims. But it's also really scary to know that, you can hide how you're tracking location and all of these different things. So have you seen digital abuse and technology facilitated stalking evolve over the last 20 years as you've been doing this work?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I see it evolving every couple of months, genuinely. When I was being stalked, air tags weren't a thing. They had not yet been developed. They were not available. And so, but if they had been a thing, I absolutely would have had to deal with that. And so, we're hearing from women who've had air tags, Apple air tags popped in their purse, attached to their vehicle. They're so small, they're so discreet, it's almost impossible to know that it's there. Smart glasses didn't exist when I was being stalked, right? And so, yeah, okay, there's a little light that tells you you're being watched, but that doesn't stop a lot of, right? So the technology is evolving at rates that are just astounding.
It's scary.
It's terrifying. And I'm routinely the buzzkill who's why do you have Alexa in your home? Why are you talking to Siri? Why is your, I'm what are you doing? Why do you need to check in? Why do people have your location? What is happening? I want to say, too, it's important as part of Bill C-16 is not just removing the fear for your safety component of the law, but also strengthening the language around how online harassment is real harassment. So we're hoping that will give us more sort of robust tools for police to stop dismissing, oh, it just whatever happens on the internet's not real. Or that also that oh, well, you had your GPS activated. So what did you think was going to happen? So that's an encouraging kind of little glimmer of hope, is that might result in better prosecution of online harassment, which would be wonderful. But it's absolutely an evolving conversation. And it's why my heart goes out to folks who work on the front lines, because you are trying to save a woman's life. You don't have time to get constant updated training on like, oh, this new AI thing is monitoring, or like this new home security system. And then also some of the things we're told would be helpful for women then kind of backfire, right? So
Mm-hmm.
for many people, they think, well, I'm absolutely going to share my location with my friend, because if I go missing, I want
Mm-hmm.
them to know, right? Or of course I'm going to install security cameras in my home, not knowing that those are easily hacked into.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard countless horror stories of women who've had like images of the inside of their home sent to them from someone who hacked those systems. And so the folks on the front line are really just, it's both whack-a-mole, but also like like truly an ever evolving conversation of like, oh, actually that tool is bad, don't use it, try this instead. Like, and it's a nightmare, not just for
Mm-hmm.
the survivors, but also for the folks trying to keep them alive,
Absolutely.
because there's just new tech all the time.
I had an AirTag track me. I don't know what happened. It somehow got like my phone had alerted me that there was an AirTag following me, thankfully. And I'd never had an AirTag in my life because they horrify me. I think
Yeah.
they are absolutely useless and terrifying. And it ended up just being some kind of a mistake where it was an AirTag of one of my neighbors that connected to my phone. But I didn't sleep for days because I was horrified and I had no idea what could have been happening.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. That is like, it's so scary. And I think
Yeah.
it speaks to that broader conversation around how, one, we are just forfeiting our lives to tech oligarchs, like truly. And then also, those people have zero gender-based analysis, zero understanding of what, yeah, of what that can look like and how easily it
Mm-hmm.
can backfire and be used for really, really malicious means. And so my message, again, my sort of my other buzzkill message to the sector is like, stop looking to tech to solve our problems,
Mm-hmm.
because 9.5 times out of 10, the person who created that tech is either indifferent or hoping to exploit the fact that it can be used to harm women, right? And I think we need to really kind of like have a little bit of a come to Jesus moment around technology as a sector,
Mm-hmm.
and just be willing to be that buzzkill who's telling a woman like, I know this sounds like it's super just like a fun way to stay connected with friends or whatever, but like it can really put you in danger.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm on a human trafficking committee in our region, and there was previous funding. I think that the funding has changed now, but there was funding to get survivors of human trafficking ring doorbells. And everyone thought it was a fantastic idea. And while I can obviously see that there's some benefit to that, there was people that were getting hacked and, that information was getting out there. So that's changed, thankfully. But again, like after being in survival mode for how long, like you have to worry about another thing after installing something that you thought was going to be keeping you safe. It's just so frightening.
Yeah, and so that's why I have empathy and
Mm-hmm.
no judgment to women who are looking to tech for those solutions. But I think it's important for us to, just like how if a woman tells me she wants to report, I give her the good, the bad, and the ugly. I think it's important to do the same around, well, I'm thinking of getting cameras, or I'm thinking of doing this. Really just take a beat and be like, okay, pros, cons, let's look.
Mm-hmm.
Because in some cases it can be, here's evidence that this person is on my property. Great. But can also be used to further track and surveil you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Have you seen over the last probably 2 years or so AI impacting the sector?
1,000%. I actually asked the internet kind of in a joking way the other day, like, what is there a term for being like aggressively anti AI? Because I'm like, I'm that woman. That is
Me
me.
too,
And I
girl.
was like, I am a millennial, so it's like I grew up with technology. I should be like, woo, woo. And I'm really concerned about AI. I'm concerned about, again, the fact that it's ever evolving, that it's now, you could be 13 with a smartphone and for free within an hour you could make a deepfake nude of a girl at school who rejected you. Like, the speed at which the average person can access that technology is astounding. Also the privacy concerns, like, even just people, you're having a support session with someone on Zoom. Zoom has automatic AI, so it's transcribing that. Where's that going? Where's that
Hmm.
information going? Right. And also, I think as a sector, it's disappointing to see when people embrace AI, or is that AI is by definition theft. AI is by definition theft. You stole someone else's words, images, their voice in order to create that generative AI model. And so, as a consent educator, I am deeply distraught by the notion that we're ignoring that consent violation. And I can use myself as an example, right? Like my book, both the paper copy and the audiobook, were stolen by generative AI. So if you go into ChatGPT and ask questions, things will be pulled from my book. I didn't get paid for that. I didn't get credited for that. My voice, because I recorded an audiobook, my voice has been taken so I could be used in all kinds of generative AI contexts. And I have no idea, nor is anyone clearing that information with me. And this idea that like, well, you publish a book and therefore you expect people to steal, like, it's just bananas. And I think especially for feminists to just embrace that kind of technology, I think makes us hypocritical, because building a consent culture to me means a true consent culture. And so the ways in which AI are tracking us, surveilling us, the way in which, state actors are now accessing that data, the way in which you don't even have to be a really good hacker in order to exploit those technologies. Like, we're now raising young people to understand how complicated technology works from a young age. So like, the average person can become a hacker, whereas back in the day you had to like really know the stuff, right? Like my abuser traced a payphone. Payphones don't even exist anymore. And police will tell you, tech experts will tell you, tracing a payphone is incredibly difficult to do, right? So he had sophisticated knowledge of technology. Now, you could be just an average Joe Schmo and very quickly go on a Reddit forum and figure out how to do something, right? And so I think we really have to pump the brakes on the embracing of AI within our sector, not to mention society at large, because it's alarming what it's already capable of doing, and we're relatively early into its existence. And so God knows what the next few years will bring.
Yeah, it's really horrifying. I saw some kind of a study that's saying that child sexual exploitation material went up by like 30,000% over the last year or so because people are able to generate images with AI. Like, that's so scary, and people should be so more cognizant of how dangerous this kind of thing is.
Yeah, 90% of the deepfake news that exist online, or 90% of the deepfakes in general, 90% of the deepfakes that exist on the internet are non-consensual photos of women and girls in the nude. Like, in what world is that something that feminists should be like, no, I still think that's a train we need to get on, right? And so, like, to paraphrase what someone said on the internet, right, it's like whenever people say, get on the train or you'll get left behind, it's like, that train is full of child sexual abuse materials. No, thank you. I don't need to be on that train. I hope you crash. Like, worst of luck. And that's like really how I feel. And I don't care if frankly anymore, if it comes across as like being a buzzkill. I'm just like, the pros versus cons is just like so dramatically obvious to me. And so I think we really need to, again, caution survivors. And that's not even getting into the way in which survivors are accessing chatbots that are giving them really alarming advice, and are not actually directing them to the right place, are validating some really incorrect information. Like, the move towards just getting AI chatbots to replace us as support workers, like, that should also alarm us, right? Like, there's just, I wouldn't touch the stuff with a 10-foot pole, and I don't care if that makes me out of date. I will embrace the Luddite label till I die. Hater till I die.
I feel you. So pivoting a little bit, last time that we were on the podcast, we talked a lot about bystander intervention. And I know this is something that you're very passionate about. And you suggested in your Better Neighbor answer that people memorize I see, I feel as a way of talking to folks when they're seeing something that's happening. Do you have any other very simple, easy to remember bystander tips that you could share with folks?
Yeah, I think just having the courage to even just like make a face when someone says something, like, or to just be like, or even to say yikes, like, just yikes, like, truly just like, don't laugh at the joke. Give a like, ugh, or a yikes. Give a like thumbs down emoji in the group chat. Like, we underestimate how much these tiny little like, objections make a profound difference. And I can give you like a concrete example in my own life where I had a partner's friend who once made a really awful joke about what, like, just like a get back in the kitchen type, like, gross thing. And my partner at the time turned to him and was like, bro, and he was like, oh my God, relax. Like, your feminazi girlfriend has like taken all the fun out of your life, da da da. Then he just was like, yeah, it's not about her. It's about, like, it's not funny. And then a couple months later, that same friend said something also off color in a joking way. And my partner at the time just literally looked at him and he's like, bro, you're right. Ooh, take it back. Shouldn't have said that. And then they just kept drinking beers and watching the movie they were watching. And so we think that, like, those little interjections just get an eye roll, but it still made a point. It's still settled into that person. And I think it's so much more complicated than it is to interrupt this kind of nonsense. But it's actually really simple, because they're expecting you to either, even if you're uncomfortable, they're expecting you to just kind of laugh along and just sort of like, okay, or eye roll, but they're not expecting you to object. And the more we object and the more people realize, hey, everywhere I go, when I make this dumb joke, someone gives me an eye roll and tells me to grow up, then clearly I'm not finding the audience I'm looking for. And I should probably think twice about saying that again. Right? And so think small and think of, like, kind of like micro acts of feminism in which you're just sort of like giving that eye roll, giving a like, oh, really? Was that an inside thought? Because you said it out loud. Do you know you said that out loud? Because I heard it and I'm embarrassed, right? Like, those little things, even done in a joking tone, really shift slowly but surely people's attitudes around, like, oh, this isn't normal to say this stuff and expect to just get a laugh.
That's such a great perspective. I feel like people get so nervous when they talk about these kinds of things because it feels so big. And it can be so simple. One of my favorite terms is, it's crazy you felt comfortable to say that out loud.
Yes.
I love that term. I've said that many a times. So I think it makes it so much more digestible to just be like, no, just make a face and make them realize that what they are doing is wrong.
Absolutely. I was doing a training in Muskoka region. Shout out to Muskoka, big hockey culture. And we were talking about this, like, you're going to watch a hockey game and people are chirping and it's homophobic. And it's, if a player's weak, you're going to call him a girl or like whatever, like just and they're like, oh my God, I just sit there and I stew. And I got them to think about what they could do. And they literally like, let's just boo him. And I was like, yes, boo that man. Like, literally they were like, just like turning around. You're chirping the players in homophobic and misogynist ways, and would turn around and be like, boo, like, boo. And they were like, oh my God, that's the thing I would do. And I'm like, yeah, you're a hockey player. You know how to boo, do it. Right. Like, just like thinking about like ways that, again, not, like, if it's not your personality to be like, that's inappropriate, you shouldn't say that, then find a sentence that's going to get the same message across. Right. Like, I do this work for a living and I don't say that's appropriate, don't talk. Like, that's not how I talk either. Right. And so thinking about, just like, oh my God, I cannot believe you thought you could say that to me. Or like, you could not possibly have thought that was going to be funny to me. Or just like, yikes. Or like, oh, that's not funny. Or like, oh, way to make it awkward. Like, all of those things are just enough of a nudge to be like, I'm not on your side. If you thought I was on your side, I'm not. And those little things, I could tell you, they make a difference big time. And like the thumbs down in a group chat, like, oh,
it makes a statement.
It's right? It's like, we've all had like, you divulge something to someone and you get like a okay back and you just feels like a gut punch. Well, it's kind of the same equivalent of like just being like, someone posts a meme or something and you're just like, thumbs down. Like, you're just like, what? Why did you think that was funny? And again, sometimes it can feel like I'm the only person doing that and now everyone thinks I'm the one that's the buzzkill. But that's the joy of it, is if we all do it, people realize it's not just like, oh, you can't say that in front of Julie. It's, you can't say that at all, because people will be like, dude, I'm so embarrassed to know you right now. Like, I am embarrassed to be knowing you right now. And then they realize, oh, it's not about Julie or feminists, right? It's about human beings recognizing that it's not a decent thing to say. Yeah.
It's also empowering for other people. Like, I'm sure there's other people in that group chat that are equally as uncomfortable or icked out by what this person is saying. So it gives them the opportunity to also do micro feminist acts.
Yeah, 1,000%. And that's what we know about the bystander effect, right? Is that like, it's that people freeze and they're expecting someone else to do something. But what the research shows is that if you start, people are likely to join in and help you. Like, that is like the psychology backs that up, right? Is that like, I was just waiting for permission. So if Lily starts something and then I'm like, yeah, she's right, right? Then like that's now 2 people, and now that's 3 people, and like that's literally how we break the bystander effect. And so it's not just like a cutesy thing to do. It's like there is evidence to back up that it's effective.
I'm interested in how you got into this work. So I know I've watched a lot of your interviews recently, and I know that you've said you've grown up in a very feminist household, you have very supportive parents. I know that you said that your grandmother came out as a survivor of domestic violence, and I think you said that she was still living with your grandfather at the time.
No, but he's still
No,
alive.
but he's
So
still
she called him
alive.
out while he was still alive. Yeah.
I'm like, good for her. That's
Badass as hell. Yeah.
incredible. I love that.
Yeah.
Um, were these contributing factors to you entering into the sector, or what was your push to move into the violence against women sector?
Good question. So, like you said, yeah, I did grow up. Like, my mother worked in predominantly male dominated fields. She worked construction, and she would put pink shoelaces on her work boots as a sort of this like micro feminist act of like, I don't have to remove my femininity in order to be able to do this job. And so she worked various jobs in the trades. And yeah, my grandmother was one of the first 12 women hired as a laborer at the Inco mines, which was a huge monumentous occasion, but also brought her tremendous hate and backlash. And she experienced some of the most heinous forms of workplace harassment I've ever heard of. So that's where I come from. And I was also the first person in my family to go to university. And so I came from a very, very working class background. And I felt tremendous pressure to not just get a piece of paper on the wall, but really do something with my degree. And so when I went to university, I originally started off in journalism because I just wanted to be able to tell people stories, took women's studies as an elective, started learning about privilege and all of these things because I didn't feel privileged, right? Like in that I was like, my family, I can't navigate this university space. I'm from a small French town. I'm now living in a big city, going to an English university. Like I didn't show up there feeling like I had a lot of privilege.
Yeah.
But other than kind of holding the torch for my family. And so learning about, I'm a white woman and, all of these things made me feel like, okay, I have to do something beyond just going to school. I have this free time. What can I do? So I started volunteering with Big Brother, Big Sister, because that was kind of like the only thing I could think of. And then I had a classmate who was a collective member at the Sexual Assault Support Center of Ottawa. And she talked about how it just was incredible work. And that in her 60-hour training, she felt like she'd learned more about feminism than she had doing her entire degree. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And so that's how I started, as I started doing work as a support worker. And then it just sort of ballooned from there, because I think people often think that it's because of my personal experience, but in fact, it was, I think my personal experience is what kept me in the movement, because it's hard. And there's very little paid work. I've been in this sector for 20 something years. I've never had a salary. I've never had health insurance. I've only worked contract. So what's kept me in the fight is the reality that like, I got to be the person I needed when I was going through it. But my initial sort of, it was just this place of privilege of like, I work my job at the mall and I come home and go to school. Like my life is very much about me, and I should be giving back to other people. And so shout out to community-based organizations who are providing incredible education on feminism, because that's what, and I think I became known as the person that was like willing to do the public speaking thing, of people being like, we need someone to speak at this protest and I'm too shy. And I was like, whatever, I'll do it. And I think that's what kind of snowballed the like, oh, let's just get Julie to be the sort of the loud public education person, because she's willing, And I think fundamentally, as messed up as it is, it's like, if you survive attempted murder, talking to a group of high school students is like a cakewalk. You know what I mean? I'm like, public speaking, like, what's the worst that's going to happen to me? So it kind of gave me this like weird courage to be extroverted, because I was like, yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. I love that you had so many like very cool women who came before you that had inspired you, and then women beside you at the same time who were inspiring you at the same time. I think there's a lot of camaraderie when you go into these feminist organizations, and there's a lot of support that folks get when they're in here, both as obviously like survivors or clients, but also as the community of staff members or volunteers or whoever it is. It's such a beautiful and hopeful place to be in, even if it is dealing with some of the scariest things that people can be dealing with.
Absolutely. And I think that's the work that sexual assault centers and community-based organizations are providing that is so invisible, which is like they're training dozens and dozens of volunteers who are going out into the world and providing that analysis. And that's a beautiful, beautiful resource that community-based organizations provide. And also, like, from my personal experience, makes me even more irate when people accuse me of man hating because it's like, one, if you want me to stop hating men, maybe send me your best, but you're not. Like, these people are sending me death threats, and then they're like, why don't you like us? And I'm like, listen to yourself. But also, like, when I was doing work to get a sexual assault center at Carleton and the president threatened to sue me for libel because I was defaming the institution, heavy quotes, my father responded by buying me a megaphone. Right? Like, that's where I come from, is my father
That's iconic.
Iconic. Like, and so, like, my dad just being, and when I was, harassed by the military, my father is a former military member. And so he said, as a military member, I don't think you should come forward because these people are dangerous and they hold a grudge and they will make your life miserable. But as your father, I know you'll feel like a hypocrite if you don't speak out because you encourage people to do the same. So he was like, do it and we've got your back. And every time someone has threatened to sue me, my family that has no money, like, I'm very working class, is like, don't worry about it. We'll get a GoFundMe, like, speak the truth, speak the truth, speak the truth. And so I'm so, like, #blessed that, like, I didn't come from money. I didn't come from formal education. I didn't come from access to a lot of resources. But it's how I know that there's feminists in all kinds of spaces, because they didn't use that word necessarily, but they were doing the most. And that's what's helped ground me. And then just that, like, passion of, I know we need to be having this conversation because I wish someone was when it was happening to me.
Yeah, that's incredible. So as we wrap up here, Julie, obviously part of Choose Your Neighbor is encouraging folks to be better neighbors to people who are experiencing gender-based violence. And we are going to ask you the question again, because we ask on every single podcast. But how do you think that we can all be better neighbors to people who are experiencing gender-based violence in any of its forms?
I think you need to spend your money. So spend your money donating to the organizations that are keeping women and girls alive. But I think you also need to support and spend money educating yourself, truly. Pam Cross's And Sometimes They Kill You is an incredible book that's incredibly powerful, right? Defending Battered Women on Trial by Elizabeth Sheehy, an incredibly important book, right? Like, there are so many books that explain the reality of gender-based violence in Canada. There are survivor narratives, there are academic books, there are podcasts like this that you can listen to. If you are cash poor, you can take them out from the library. You can, listen to the audiobooks through the library. You can, but, like, taking on the responsibility of educating yourself on how this stuff works is such a huge load that you're taking off of survivors who are not only asking you for support, but having to teach you about the stuff at the same time versus, like, take the time, take a training. I mean, there's so many organizations that are offering free webinars on different issues. It shouldn't just be survivors and feminists that are showing up to that, right? It should also be people who are like, that is something I don't know about. Like, educate yourself, read a book. And I don't mean that in a condescending way. Like, I mean it literally, like, pick up a book, read a podcast, find some YouTubers, like, find the content is out there. And it's just such a bummer to me how often our audiences are people who are already converted, rather than just like, hey, I have sons and I want them to be good people. What can I do? What can I read?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We had some stats that were saying that about 70 to 80% of people who are experiencing gender-based violence will tell a family member or a friend. And we base a lot of our public education on that, because how are you going to feel good in yourself knowing that someone comes to you and you have no idea what these resources are? So we've actually developed public education based on that. And I know you also have some really, really incredible seminars that you do on bystander intervention. I've been to them. They're all free. They're incredible. They're great resources. So I agree. I think education is power, and we need to be able to, whether you can spend your money on it or not, there's so many different ways that you can educate yourself to help people who desperately need it. So
yeah. And again, it's not about if you don't have, like I said, if you're cash poor and you can't support organizations monetarily, they're looking for volunteers.
Yep.
They're looking for folks to help promote the work that they're doing. So even just reposting an event, showing up to Take Back the Night, showing up to December 6th. I mean, few things break my heart more than living in a city of 1 million people and I show up to December 6th and there's maybe 100.
Yeah.
Like, where are we? Oh, we're such allies. Where are you? Oh, but it's cold. Okay, take an hour, right? Like, and thinking, oh, it doesn't make a difference. It does make a difference to survivors. When we show up to events and we see hundreds and thousands of people who've rallied in defense of us, that absolutely helps me get up in the morning versus, wow, it's me and my 12 feminist friends at this event. Doesn't make me feel great about how supported we are in the community, right? And so it's, if you got money, spend it and give it directly to services, bypass all this other third-party stuff, put it directly in the pockets of the people doing the work, but also educating yourself by showing up to events, listening, reading books, like take on some of the emotional labor of dismantling gender-based violence instead of just putting it on us to be both surviving, trying to heal, and trying to do advocacy at the same time, right? Like many hands make for light work.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being with me here today, Julie. I really appreciate it. I really, really respect all the work that you're doing. I think it's such important work, and I'm so grateful that you're here to share more about it.
Thanks so much for having me.
That wraps up this week's show, but the conversation is far from over. We want to hear what you think. Use the hashtag #SheIsYourNeighbor on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, or X and join in the conversation. I'm your host, Jenna Main. This podcast is produced by Lily Proksch, edited by Amy Bishop England, and brought to you by Women's Crisis Services of Waterloo Region. We all have a role to play in ending domestic violence.